I'm not fixing the body. The body can fix itself all on its own. Mm-hmm. I'm just helping it find the path. And I think that's how I think of everything that I do, even the fascial remodeling. I don't think I'm fixing the body. Mm-hmm. I'm saying, do you remember when you could move like this? Mm-hmm. And maybe you could settle somewhere in the middle.
I've been a horse trainer for over 15 years. In that time, I had a lot of life changes that inspired me to look a little bit deeper into the gaps that I believe are in this industry and the way we interact with our animals. What I found is that they have been huge in being able to help people shift their perspective, completely shift their energy, and really thrive in their relationships. Hello. I wanted to welcome Tami Elkayam. Did I say it right?
Yes, you did. Got
it. To today's Mirror in the Stall podcast. And I always find my guests, not always, but most of the time, by stumbling through social media, and then I'll see something and it will like really resonate with me. And I can't even tell you which one it was because I think I've seen several now and been like, yes. So I love following those little breadcrumbs. And so thank you so much for coming on here and spending time with us.
Well, thank you for having me. It's, awesome to meet other people who are like-minded.
Yeah, that's what I feel like this is all about, is making those connections. And I like sharing what other people are doing and how they're doing the work and how it's, what they have to offer to benefit people. So tell us a little bit about what it is you do.
I think the simplest way to put it is I do body work for horses, and I really look at it as body work because I always think about treating the whole body. But I think the simplest way to look at it is I take the bag that contains the body and I reshape it. In very simple terms. Mm-hmm. I gotta go, where is the dent? Mm-hmm. How can I pop it back out?
Right. So good. So do you do like a specific modality, or is this just your own thing?
It's been a really long journey. I started originally with Masterson. Jim came to the barn I was at and I saw it and I went, it's kind of interesting. And I'd had a mare at the time who was a little difficult. And so I played with that. I bought the book, I did the course, I kind of went through the steps. And I came out at the other end going, well, I'm certified, but I really don't know much. And so I started this journey. I went and did cranial sacral therapy for horses through the Upledger Institute. And I really liked that, it really resonated with me. And it really started this journey of, nothing, go find out. And so I kept learning, and a lot of the anatomy drawing I was doing was for me to learn how things were connected, where it was going in the body. And so that's how that sort of evolved. And then Dr. Sandra Howlett, who was teaching the course at the time, she was like, oh, can you do these for the study guide? So that's how that evolved. They got more and more intricate. And I did those she taught 4 levels at this time, and I did each one multiple times. And then after that, that kind of created this hunger of, but why? Where is it connected? And so I think what happened is I went on this big journey of like really diving in. I dipped my toe in osteopathy and realized it wasn't how I interact with a horse, and it wasn't for me, even though it's a very valid modality. It wasn't how I move with a horse, maybe because I came from cranial sacral therapy. And so I did a lot of learning. I looked at a lot of different fascial modalities. I just played with stuff. And I think, you know, through the years of doing it, I'd kind of realized that we've all become too complicated and too sort of tunnel visioned into, oh, it's this and it's that. And I'm like, okay, well, let's not make it so complicated. Plus, I'm innately lazy. So how can I get 5 things in one time?
Right.
And so that kind of was how this tensegrity stuff started to happen, where I wasn't looking at joint structures, neurological pathways, muscle attachments. I was looking at the big picture and going, what's happening in the big picture? So really zoom out and go, what is the shape? That bag that holds it all together, what is that doing when it doesn't have input from a human being, when it's left to its own devices? And how does that translate into what I'm finding when I'm asking the joint or the muscle or the nerve, what are you doing? And so that was that evolution of, you know, how did we make this work? Does it have to be so complicated? And that's kind of how this tensegrity thing, this tensegrity balancing therapy evolved, where it was really organic. It was never, you know, like, oh, I'm going to invent my own thing. And I still don't think about it like my own thing. I just think that I'm lazy and I've oversimplified stuff and it works. And so that's really how that kind of came to be. And I still read a lot. I love neurology. And I work a lot with the people at Epona Mind. They do feet, because I figured, oh, well, I guess for people, that balance is so hugely important. It's got to be important for horses as well. And, you know, their feet totally deform from what's happening higher up, just like humans do. And so I kind of spend a lot of time learning stuff there. And I just collect. You know, I am the quintessential collector. I'm a hoarder. I hoard all the information I find, and then I sort through it in this Rolodex in my mind, and I go, yes, 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 yes. And then I tie it all together, mustn't forget this, and I put it in my little box.
Right.
And so I do this, and every once in a while I get stumped by a horse or by something that's happened, and I'm like, And so I'll go in and I'll open my little box and I'll be like, oh, I forgot about that. And I forgot about that. And so over time, this is how it evolved into what I do now, which is very, I guess it's similar. Somebody said to me, it's similar to like Feldenkrais and Hanna somatics and things like that, where it really is this kind of slow holding and getting the body to pop out the dent and to be more balanced somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love the fact that there is no, the idea of like collecting from all the different things and then smashing it in and going, I don't know, it works, because I do that constantly.
Well, because the thing is, we all assimilate, right? So the moment you learn something, and this is, I think, something that's interesting for me when I teach other people, the moment you learn something, you look at it, you know, we kind of do that, we evaluate, right? And then if we decide we like it, we're going to buy it.
Right.
We assimilate it, right? And then we go out and use it. Right. But the moment you go out and use it, I have a friend in England, Mary Sargent. I don't know if you follow her, definitely worthwhile doing. She works the same way I do. But we always compare, and I go, well, I do it like this. And she goes, well, I do it like this. And I'm like, we go away and think about it. And then we talk about it the next day and we're like, oh yeah, I tried that. It's good. So we all assimilate things and we change it around a little, and then it becomes ours. And from everything we do, even if you bought it, even if you went somewhere and you went, oh, I like that, that works. And then you went home and tried it and you're like, it works, but it's not for me. So it's different for everyone. And I think it's important that people try lots of things.
Yeah.
Right. It's really important, because the more tools you have, the more able you are to affect change.
Right. Yeah. So you were saying, we were chatting a little bit before about the different types of clinics you do. And you said you partner up with someone that does the human side. So what does that look like when you guys do clinics like that?
Well, so Carol Schofer does she teaches dressage. She's qualified up the wazoo with all sorts of USDF dressage things that I know nothing about. I sit there, they all talk dressage, and I'm like, it just doesn't look good. I don't have that doesn't look right. I don't even pretend to have enough knowledge. But what I like, it just doesn't look good. I don't even pretend to have enough knowledge. But what I see, and this is sort of, I think maybe because I came to this from an artist perspective, because that's what I did for my higher education, as I went to art school and I studied fine art painting. I look at everything in terms of shape and where the dent is and what's moving and what's not. And so what we do is she deals with the people in terms of their crookedness after I go. So she'll give them like Feldenkrais exercises to help them. And then I assess the horse and give them homework exercises for the horse to help them. And then we put it all together like Humpty Dumpty, and we put it in the schooling ring. And then they all kind of go off all weird. They're like, I'm trying to be aware and none of it's working. And so eventually they forget that they're being watched and they kind of fall into their patterns. And that's when I yell really weird stuff, which when they think about goes, oh yeah. And Carol actually gives them the correct terminology and helps them control their horse, while as I'm like, your horse is sagging. And they're like, yeah, I'm aware. I'm like, well, you gotta not sag your sternum. Like, lift your sternum. And they're like, oh, okay. I'm like, higher, relax your shoulders. Mm-hmm. So I do that sort of thing because I don't have the correct equitation lingo, but Carol does. Mm-hmm. And so we do these clinics and we look at feet, and then we discuss things like, okay, have you thought about breathing? Mm-hmm. So how do you breathe? How does your horse breathe? Let's have a look at that. Can you feel how when you're holding your breath, your horse is holding your breath? Can you feel how if the horse, most people and most horses are kind of bent to the right. Mm-hmm. This is my obsession to find out why.
Why? I always ask people why they think it is. So.
Well, the thing is, it's one of those things that I keep reading about. I don't know, but everybody's bent to the right. Even me, who's a lefty, we're all a little bent to the right. We're all more contracted on that side. Unless we've had major trauma, in which case the pattern does a weird thing. Right. And I'm always like, why? Well, chromosomes rotate to the right, and some of that cell division that happens early on in the embryonic stages rotates to the right, but I don't know. Mm-hmm. So, we kind of look at that and we try and help them figure out how to not be there. Mm-hmm. And it's awesome. We do that. We look at the feet. We talk about, well, if you're breathing and you're kind of collapsed to the right, that means the right side of your diaphragm is not really online. Mm. And if it's not really online, that means you're doing shallow breathing on that side. Well, if that's the case, how does that pertain to other things that you're noticing? Mm-hmm. And so we play with that and try and give them tools to remember how to help their horse, how to help themselves, and how to make it work together, which is always a challenge.
Right. Can you tell the milkshake story? You don't have to use names. But
okay. I think everybody saw it by now. But so one of the things is we have this lovely client who is very diligent, very driven. Her horse had huge changes through the program, because I do a distance program, which really started because of COVID, because I couldn't go to Colorado. And Carol was like, you gotta help me. And so we did all this sort of via distance, and that's how it was born. And so she does the horse homework. She was doing her homework, but things were like, the horse went, he became like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. He was like, poof. But he seemed stuck. You know how those big muscly men, they're like, I'm big, but I got no range of motion, right? He was a little like that. Yes. And so he was a little like that. And I was like, okay, what is going on? And I asked Carol to send me a picture of the lady. And so she sends me this picture and I'm like, oh, and I posted it and everybody saw, you know, how the horse looked exactly like the rider. And so the next time I went out to Colorado is we did all this and we rode and it wasn't happening. So her lower half was moving, but her top half was super rigid. And so I said to her, okay, you just got a 4-wheel drive. You know, you're only doing 2-wheel drive in your hips. You got a 4-wheel drive. And so that only lasted a short amount of time. And then she forgot. And then she was backed up. I was like, oh my God, just 4-wheel drive. And she's like, I don't know. Sometimes I forget and it's not working. And I go, if your boobs aren't making milkshake, it's not working. And so she would ride and I'd be like, milkshake, milkshake, milkshake. And sure enough, the moment you did it, the horse would levitate, like the whole thing came up. And it's fascinating for me. I have other stories like that. One of the riders, her horses got this sideways head tilt always. And I said to her, just swallow a lot when you're riding. I know it's hard, but try and swallow. Sure enough, the moment she swallowed, head straight. And it's one of those things that I always think it's hilarious because it never ceases to amaze me, like how something small that the human does can have such a huge, profound change in the horse. And so I love these clinics, and we're doing another one now in December that's full, but I think, and we're going to see if we can get one at Romy's. I'd really like to do more of them because I think there's not enough of those where like they take the whole thing. We give you tools, not, oh, well, I did the body work. I think that's something that the more I do this, the more I realize like I did body work, you're good. I'm not going to tell you what I did.
Right.
And then it takes that ability for the owner to keep going forward to a new level if you give them tools. And I think part of what's happening in the horse industry is there is a lot of this covert, like I'm hoarding my information, and if you want it, you know, you have to really like pay for it, and I'm only going to give you so much so you stay dependent. And I feel like the only animal that's paying is the horse. Like humans are, okay, well, I'll keep doing this, but if we give riders tools, if we give horse owners tools, then they can carry it on, right? And they can improve. So the next time you see them, it's like, oh, well, we can move on to the next level of addressing things.
Yeah. And because I always think that too, is having, you know, being worked on by the chiropractor or getting the body work and having such a huge chunk of time in between sessions. You know, some people, oh, every 6 months I get my horse worked on. It's like, well,
pointless.
Right. And I'm like, well, there's so much happening in between. And it kind of feels like just save your money, but then who can afford, you know, to have someone out, you know? And so I started integrating, I don't even know. I mean, it's just a mixture. It's kind of, I've learned different things and I try it and then they work. So I'm like, okay, well, we're just do this. And it's kind of feels like I like to hear what your tools that you give them in between sort of look like. Because that's what I keep thinking. Like, there's no sense in me training your horse, having you get on your horse and they're holding all this tension when there's these little things you can do to release that before you get on. Because every single performance issue you have, the base of it is tension. If you're not working through tension, then there is no issue. It's all easy and effortless.
Well, in theory, yes. If you have, I think there are two things to look at here, if we're going to be honest, and that is riding well is the equivalent of being a really good dancer. Okay, so riding really well, I mean, especially if you look at dressage, is the equivalent of being a prima ballerina. Not everyone can do it.
Right.
Okay, so let's start with that. That to be really that, and I've seen some really great riders that are able to just sit on the horse, go, okay, that's not working, that's not working, that's not working. I'm going to lift here, I'm going to support here, and I'm going to make some room here, and still stay stuffed in their body and fluidly move on. That takes a huge amount of skill. So let's start with that. Okay. The fact that we don't have that, or we don't have that ability, because a lot of us, I think it's a gift. Like the people that are really skilled riders, it's a gift, right? They just have that innate ability to feel what's happening under them and in their hands. And we can all train and get better, but some people are just more gifted at it. So there is that element. And then, yes, there is the element that through a lot of the riding that we do, because the horse has to compensate for itself and for us and for the saddle that fit yesterday but doesn't fit today, there is tension that builds up. And so what tends to happen with a lot of people is this is how it works. And this is what I tell my clients. So you get your horse, they're kind of like this. You put the saddle on, you get on, you scooch on real good. Scooch that fascia like, get it in there. You get on and you try and go straight and you're making the horse to shoulder out, haunches in. The horse is like, girlfriend, I have no idea what's going on. I cannot do that. I don't bend that way. And you're like, yes, you will. And so we kind of put a little more effort into it. And so this happens, right? Only in the school arena or only in whatever they're training for, be it Western, be it what pleasure. It's kind of repetitive because they're trying to attain something. And so then they take the horse out, they take all the tack off and they put it back. If the horse is lucky, it has a pasture and it gets room to stretch itself out. If it's unlucky, it lives in a stall and it goes back and it stands there, even more corkscrewed in than it was before. And this kind of builds over years of doing this, right? Until something gives. And so I always tell people like, okay, that's not conducive to getting anywhere. So how about you do exercises before and after you ride? So that before you offer the horse the possibility of being somewhere in the realm of room in the bag, or as I tell people, putting air in the bag so you have some attainability to achieve what you're asking the horse. And then you do the exercises after so that when you put the horse away, the body has a chance to stay neutral and not get cold in whatever pattern it had to do in order to keep up with what you were asking it.
Right.
So they get exercises for me that are for before and exercises that are for after. A lot of them are very simple because I understand that not everybody feels what I feel or sees what I see. So they kind of get a pattern that works for that horse. So I'll look at the horse, I'll look at their pattern, what's working, what's not working, where things are not put together. And according to that, I'll custom make an exercise routine for them that they can then apply. Some you can do before and after, some you do only before, and some you do only after. Basically, they have to apply it daily.
Right.
Because that's, I think what people don't understand a lot of times is the big difference, like you said, when you go and you get treated and when you are trying to remodel, right? And so if we are treating, you're going to get release, you're going to get more room, you're going to feel a little bit better. Areas that were stuck are going to do better. You might get restored joint mobility, but the bag, remember we said zoom out, the big bag is still doing the same thing. It's still here. And so if we don't address that, if we don't ask it to find a more neutral spot, then everything is going to revert back to that. And the only way you can achieve that change is through slow, repetitive load. So there's a difference. You know, a lot of people say, oh, I do myofascial release. I'm like, awesome, it works. But it works better if you do fascial remodeling. Okay, and so that's kind of the difference of between just doing body work and doing what I do is I try and encourage fascial remodeling of the bag.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, because I think of going to the chiropractor once a week. But when I was going to the chiropractor once a week and doing Pilates 3 times a week, the adjustments were hardly ever. And I was like, oh, hold on. Like, oh yeah, you have to do the stuff in between, or what's the point? It just all like right back to
right. It goes right back because the thing is and I think this is the concept that, you know, fascia is a very complex thing. It's a very buzzy word right now. Everybody's into the fascial lines and into fascia, but I think very few people kind of really go and think about what it is or how it works. and what types they are, because there's tons of types of fascia. There is the interstitial, which is like this really kind of Guzmar thing. There is the snotty kind of fascia. There's big sheets of fascia, like the thoracolumbar fascia. There is levels of fascia within the muscle. And so, was that a dog? And so, if you have to take all those into account, they each have a different function. And so just saying, oh, I do fascial release is awesome, but all that forms like this giant bag, and the external bag is quite stiff because fascia, like bone, is piezoelectric. So the more you load it, the more it gets. So the areas that get the most load become the stiffest, right? So bone, the more you load it, that's where it'll lay down more bone. Right. And so if you keep loading it in a repetitive motion, which for most of us is we sit heavy on the right side and we kind of lean into that horse's right front, and the horse is already sitting there and it's got its neck out here to the left to try and compensate. If we keep doing that, that's the shape the horse is going to hold. And so the way to do that is to change the bag so that everything else in the bag can find a more neutral space.
I like the term remodeling versus just giving those releases. It's
well, because the releases are very local. So as you said, like you can go and get a really good massage, you can go get chiropractic, it'll feel really good, but your bag is still here. So it won't take long before the body goes, wait, okay, I got to get back in my slot in the bag.
So the exercises that you give, that's what you're shifting, is the actual bag, correct? Is that what
I try to? Yes, that is the goal. The goal is to look at what the bag is doing and how can we change it.
Right.
So I'm like the auto body guy. So you know how like you in a car accident, you get the dent, and you take it to the auto body guy, and he's like, That's kind of what I do with the exercises, is I try and pop out the dent and smooth out the wrinkles.
Do you have any like scenarios or stories about having a horse that people are like, maybe behaviorally? Because I know obviously the physical stuff starts to affect behavioral and then snowballs into this horse is whatever. Any stories that you have of having a horse that was really extreme in that way and being able to work it back to, something that was actually functioning horse just by, fixing the body?
Well, behavior is always pain related, right? And I just listened to this awesome webinar about pain and nociception through Center of Biomechanics. And the thing is, behavior is always pain related, right? And I just listened to this awesome webinar about pain and nociception through Center of Biomechanics. And the thing is, behavior is always the result, especially in horses, of body issues, right? So it is easier for a horse to be compliant with you, unless they're an Arabian and then they just like to mess with you. I love them.
My first horse was an Arabian, I know.
They're my favorite horses, but they're just like, can I do it? Is it going to annoy you? But as a whole, it is easier for them to be compliant. And so, he talked a lot in this webinar about how changes in behavior were really indications of pain in the body. Do I have a specific case? I have a few horses that, were either bucking, where I can tell you a specific case. So I had a client with a horse that didn't like to be brushed. No grooming allowed, certainly not on the flanks and kind of around the belly, no grooming allowed. And she scoped it, she treated it, you name it, she'd done it. And basically the phrenic nerve was irritated. The phrenic nerve innervates the diaphragm.
Where that nerve run from? I'm super obsessed with learning the difference?
So phrenic nerve depends, because this is the other thing. We all assume all horses look the same inside, and they really don't. Phrenic nerve is 4, 5, 6, can be down to 7 and 8. Okay. Are you going to go 8? Yes, there is a cervical nerve root 8. Okay. So it can be anywhere in there. Depends on the horse. But from there, those are the spinal nerve roots, and they run down with the vagus nerve into the diaphragm. And so this horse basically had very restricted phrenic nerve on the left side. It also didn't like to be girthed. It had, it used to get out of breath real easy. A lot of that was all related. And so once that was solved, he was a lot easier. I had a horse that used to kick out with the right hind all the time. All the time, just the right hind, sweet as pie. But if you stood somewhere behind him, boom. And I'm a little weird because I think in pictures, not like most people think numbers, letters. I find it easier to think in pictures. And I was like, So I kind of went and stood, out of range, but in the spot, and I went, So I treated the eyeball. He couldn't rotate his eye far enough, so he assumed it was dangerous. He just because horses are triggered by peripheral vision, right? And so he couldn't rotate the eye far enough. And so his mode of operation was, if there's somebody behind me on that area, I can't see, so I'm going to kick out to be safe. Once we treated the eyeball and he was able to rotate the eye properly, never did again.
Oh, really cool. Yeah, I was just reading here and there a little bit about cranial sacral, because I have I have a friend who does it, not on horses but humans, and the sessions are so fascinating, because I'm like, how do you know that by touching here is going, like, and it's the moment I think of where it is, she's like, oh, right here, and I'm like so can you explain cranial a little bit, because I'm fascinated by it? And she just said, I don't even understand what I'm doing sometimes. And I was like, that's not helping me.
So basically the concept is that there's fluid that surrounds the brain, right? And there is a rhythm to it, which is the cranial sacral rhythm, and you have these receptors right here in the sagittal suture, that basically, it's a little like, I tell people it's like the toilet. I know that sounds awful, but so you know how the toilet fills up to a certain point and it stops until you flush it? That's kind of that concept. And so the cranial sacral kind of fluid builds up, it opens those sutures, it's microscopic movement, but it opens everything up, and then it reaches the point where all the receptors are going, excuse me, too much liquid, and then it basically opens like flushing the toilet, and it goes down and nourishes the entire spinal cord. And this cycle is repeated. So for horses, it's between 8 and 14, 7 to 8 to 12 to 14 is kind of normal cycles per minute.
Okay.
And what that does is it, bathes and nourishes the central nervous system. So the brain and the spinal cord are in this thick sheet of fascia called the dura mater. And so it's a closed system.
Right.
And then it goes all the way back. Same for us. It goes all the way down to the sacrum. And then, at some point they're like, all the receptors are like, not enough. And it comes back up.
Right.
Okay. So that's the really simplified version of how it works.
Right.
And everything in the body, we are essentially working with electricity, right? So we have fluid and we have electricity. That's how the body works. And so the central nervous system gives electrical impulses to everything in the tissue. And you can follow that rhythm throughout the body and find out where it's not getting and where it's getting, because it follows through the nerves. And so people that have studied this for long enough and have learned to feel what it feels like can tell if they touch somewhere, if that rhythm is off from, let's say, the central rhythm, or if there is a slower rhythm or a sticky rhythm. So we have amplitude, symmetry, and speed. So, you know, how strong is the rhythm? How fast is the rhythm? And so on. And that gives you indication to dysfunction. And you can use that to listen around the body and find out what's working and what's not working. And essentially, you can also use that to then catch a ride and try and treat, try and get through. Because, you know, intention, especially with horses, is one of our most powerful tools. And the whole concept is in cranial sacral therapy is that we facilitate relief for the body. I'm not fixing the body. The body can fix itself all on its own. I'm just helping it find the path. And I think that's how I think of everything that I do, even the fascial remodeling. I don't think I'm fixing the body. I'm saying, do you remember when you could move like this? And maybe you could settle somewhere in the middle.
Right. Yeah. So some of the stuff that I do, I feel like, and I'm excited to hear your take on it. Sometimes I say stuff and I'm like, I mean, this feels right, but maybe I don't know. So if a horse is experiencing, you know, chronic discomfort somewhere in its body, and it's being ridden a certain way constantly, and it's so uncomfortable, it feels almost like they can shut down and kind of disassociate from that. So then when I put my leg on it, it's like nothing's there. I'm like, because your horse is finally shut, it's either its mouth or whatever's chronically going on that's causing it discomfort, it finally just goes away from that part of its body. And so I'm always saying, we're not fixing this. We're just creating this container where the horse can remember that it can do it for itself. And bringing awareness to those spots, even just by touching and having the horse be in its body and just staying neutral and having the intention of feel what it feels like to be safe here in this spot of your body. And it feels like it seems too simple sometimes, but then they get these huge releases. Sometimes it feels like melting that space that maybe froze for a reason before, and aggression comes out, or I say aggression, whatever. I always explain it like whatever they felt like they needed to do before they had to shut down because it wasn't even an option, kind of can come out almost like a somatic experiencing a little bit. And those releases are there, whether it
well, it is called, I mean, if you kind of look at what the Upledger Institute does and the Cranial Institute does, it is called a somato-emotional release.
Oh, cool. Okay. That sounds like something I need to look into, because I feel like maybe I'm doing something like that. And it's really, it is that piece where it's like intuitive, and I don't dive too far into any modality because I'm like, I don't want to shut down, and I'll grab little pieces from things and I'm like, just holding space for that body to remember it knows how to, and that now it's safe to, so it can go back to doing that thing that it used to know how when it was born before anyone screwed it up. Bringing that piece back into homeostasis. But when you had said that thing about the eye, that's what had triggered me to think about the cranial, because I had read somewhere that when those face plates shift, it cuts out the peripheral vision. So having horses that spook a lot can just
well, most horses, like most humans, I mean, you can look at me, hello, yeah, most horses, like most humans, do not have a symmetrical face.
Right.
So simply because of the way we move, we reinforce that pull on that one whole diagonal. And so most horses, like most humans, don't have a fully balanced cranial vault or balanced TMJs, which then what your TMJs are doing is what your hips are doing, guaranteed, hands down. So if your TMJ is not totally balanced, neither will your hips be. And so the body is designed, I think this is the biggest thing. If you ask me, like, what is the most important thing for people to know? The body is designed to compensate. All people like me are doing is returning the ability of the body to compensate. I ain't fixing it. I'm just saying, hey, let me make some room here so you can compensate for what you've been asked to do.
Right.
Okay. The body is designed to compensate. It's not meant to be symmetrical. If it was symmetrical, it would break. It would have no room to do that. Let me just do this so I can compensate. We're not a machine. We're a living thing, and living things adapt to deal with the situation. So that's really important to kind of remember that And as we adapt, we do what you describe, where it's like, that is too painful for me to even think about. So horses are very good at it. Even when I treat them, sometimes I can tell, I look at them and I'm like, oh, Elvis, I call it Elvis has left the building because it's too much for them. And so they're standing there, they're taking it physically, but they've escaped or they've gone inside somewhere and hidden. And so, yes, it does take, and when the body learns tricks, shortcuts. The brain can't deal with everything all the time. So once a shortcut is learned that is convenient and works, that becomes the new reality after a while. And whatever was the original path is forgotten. Mm-hmm. Even when there's no more pain, even when everything is working. This is why you get chronic pain, even when there is no more issue in the tissue, because that's what the body remembers. And that's kind of that pathway. And they need to relearn to activate different pathways.
Mm-hmm. So what is the best way a person can maintain? Is it doing those specific exercises? And are there a lot of people out there that are available that do stuff like this, or
I don't know. I think the thing is, I think the biggest thing you can do is have awareness. And I think this is something that I'm learning more and more the more I deal with people and their horses, is that body awareness is an issue. And I don't mean how big you are or whatever. I'm talking about having awareness of where you are in space. Mm-hmm. We have learned, there's the Nobel Prize winner this year, Armand Paputian, I think his name is. It's some spectacular name. He basically found, he could prove now how touch and proprioception, which channels it goes into. He wrote this wonderful thing that I'm still kind of digesting about piezo 1 and piezo 2 and which channel works for what. And so he said, proprioception is our sixth sense, that knowing where we are in space. And I think we are not taught to develop it enough. Mm-hmm. And I think we shut it down in horses because they try and avoid some of what we do to them. Mm-hmm. And so that affects our balance and it takes away a lot of tools that would help us be healthier in our body. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's say I'm sitting here now. I am fully aware that my left shoulder is towards you and my right shoulder is towards you and my left shoulder is further back, mm-hmm. right? If I sit here, I'm fully aware that I've got more weight in my left seat bone than I do in my right. Mm-hmm. Just things like that I think we lose that awareness. And so I think for me, I always tell people, learn to have body awareness for you and learn to observe your horse, so that when you come out and ride, we all have days where something is not so hot and we don't feel so good. So when you go out and ride, you come in and you look at your horse and you go, where are you today? Mm-hmm. What can we do today that would build on success as opposed to push the limits of your endurance? Mm-hmm. And so I think having body awareness for you and for your horse is super important. Mm-hmm. I think there's other people that do it. I've seen a lot more of it since I started advertising it. I've seen a lot more people do it. I don't know how good they are or not. I think everybody needs to try what works for them, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that what I do is the only fix, because there are lots of modalities and there are lots of things out there that you can do, and everybody needs to find what works for them and for their horse. Mm-hmm. But I think the first step to maintaining any kind of improvement or to attaining a closer place of balance, and you said homeostasis, I always think about it in terms of allostasis, because homeostasis by definition means there is a point of balance where you want to stay. Mm-hmm. The body doesn't work that way. Mm-hmm. The body's always fluctuating. Right. And so we're trying to maintain allostasis. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so it's one of those things where, where am I today? I woke up today and my God, my right hip is really sore. Well, maybe today is a day to do groundwork and not get on your horse and transfer that to your horse.
Right.
So I think that's like a good place to start.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other people that do this? Probably, because I can't be the only one, because I don't. I've had to turn people away. Like now I have people that I'm like, I can't do you till next year. I don't have time. So I hope there's more people doing it. I hope that there's more people out there who have figured out things that they can give to their clients, that they can, other than just doing the body work, that they can use to move on and keep what they've achieved through the body work for longer.
Right.
Because what happens is, you know, somebody like me comes, we treat the horse is freaking awesome, pardon my French, for like 2 or 3 weeks. And then slowly it kind of starts to unravel. And I'm the first one to tell my clients, they go, oh my God, it's so amazing. I'm like, don't get excited, it won't last. They're like, what do you mean? I go, it won't last. It won't last. Just don't get excited. If you don't do your homework, it won't last.
Right.
And I've done experiments, because I've been doing this for long enough, where I've asked people to do the homework, I've asked people to do half-ass homework, and I've asked people to not do any.
Mm-hmm.
And done the test of how long it takes for each horse to go back to where it was.
Right.
And, you know, obviously, if I come and I treat and the person rides correctly and does their homework, you're going to get huge improvement. And you're going to get, I have one of the girls, and I posted him, Valiente. Mm-hmm. She got him from Spain. He'd done 2 rounds of rehab that were unsuccessful with other people. He'd had all sorts of things put in his tendons, you name it, she tried it. And she was diligent about her homework. She was diligent about her riding. She was diligent about everything. It became this big project. It took a year, and the horse doesn't look anything like it did. Mm-hmm. But, you know, she now has, I think she has like 6 exercises left that she does. Mm-hmm. They're back to doing FEI riding. They're back to doing all that. So it's really a case of, and I know life happens, right? Some of my clients are like, oh my God, I haven't done my exercises in a week. And I'm like, well, you know, life happens. So you start again and you go back. I mean, it's like us, right? Like I've done skinny where I've been really good and I've lost a whole bunch of weight. And then slowly I've kind of gone, so it's just life, right? And so we do the best that we can and we try and work with it. But I think if you can maintain that, if you can find, the way I always tell people is, okay, so most riders go to the barn, and while they're tacking up and picking out feet and grooming, they spend so much time flapping their gums. They could have done the exercises. They could have done it. It would have taken no time. They're already there. Right. And so what's 10 minutes? Like, and the thing is also, I think it's the mindset. So we do self-care, right? We shower, we brush our teeth, you know, we do basic self-care. This is basic self-care for the horse so he can keep functioning for us.
Yeah. It is an interesting thing where it seems like it's such a short amount of time to do something that has such a lasting benefit. I work both sides, people, I do sort of the mental side for people. It's kind of my belief that a lot of the physical tension from people stems from a story they have, and it kind of reflects, right? And so we try to unwind that stuff first. And I always, in my, I have a membership, and some of the things are, here's like, spend 5 minutes, 2 minutes, start with 30 seconds a day, where you just sit and you check in with where you're at, your body's at, especially before you get out of the car at the barn, because we're only seeing them through our lens, you know. And it's so interesting because through these little master classes and stuff that I've always done, it's like, sometimes people are like, I can't find 5 minutes. And I'm like, then I don't know. I used to just, well, you know, like cheerleader. And now I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. Then you're.
Yeah. And I'm with you on that. I get to the point where they're like, well, I don't have time to do this. I go, well, then I'm not the person for you. Right. I can't help you if you can't take the time to do this. And, you know, I'm not holier than thou. I think everybody has, like I said, life happens, and sometimes you have more time and sometimes you have less. But I've had clients that say to me, yeah, I've done the exercises every day for 2 weeks. well, I missed a day here and there. And I'm looking at the pictures and I'm like, actually, one of the clients, they sent me the pictures after every 2 weeks. The clients send me pictures so we can see what needs to be tweaked in the routine and where we're going. And so she sent me the pictures and I was like, okay, why am I getting pictures of a horse without the exercises being done right after ridden work? And she's like, how did you know? I'm like, I can see it. Right. And so people always say to me, how do you know this thing happened to the horse? Because the tissue doesn't lie. Right. So whatever happens, it's in there. I can feel what's going on. It doesn't lie. You can't make it up. And so I think the thing is, for me, it's always like when they say, oh, I've done the exercise, and it turns out they've done it 4 times in 2 weeks. And they're like, oh, my horse hasn't changed so much. And I'm like, okay, well, you get in what you put out. Right. Or you get out what you put in, kind of thing.
Yeah, I do think it is part of the way that people are sort of conditioned and how we all grow up. And that piece, even when you were talking about the body awareness, they don't teach you that in school. And I feel like at some level growing up, that stuff is shut down because.
Okay, well, think about how most of us have grown up.
Right.
So if you have pain, if you're uncomfortable, you're supposed to suck it up and keep going, right? How have most of us learned? Oh, ride him through it. Mm-hmm. Ride him through what? Pain? Right. He'll work his way out of it. These are all things that we've all heard. Mm-hmm. We've all heard these things, and nobody's gone, excuse me, I think this might be wrong. This is part of what happens, right? And the thing is, one of the things I teach in my course is this kind of foundation of motion, how motion evolved, or how evolution kind of dictated how we move, and how when you take components away because we've lost proprioception, the whole thing falls apart. And one of the things is this lateral frame that we have, that there is a point in embryonic development that around the embryo for mammals there's like a ridge. It's called the Wolvian Ridge. Mm-hmm. And from that come all the limb buds, the eyes, the ears, the TMJ, and the sex organs. Oh. What do all those have in common?
I don't know.
They're all sense organs.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's so interesting.
And so they sit on your lateral frame. And when your lateral frame is struggling, so is your balance, because your proprioceptive input is struggling.
Tell me again the eyes, the TMJ.
Eyes, ears, TMJ, limb buds, and sex organs.
Okay. Very interesting.
So if you have a lateral frame that's struggling, which let's face it, most of us do, our proprioceptive input going into our brain is off. Mm-hmm. So our postural output coming out from our brain is also off.
Right.
So do we have kissing spine? No, we just have sagging lateral frame. So it depends. This is why I like these things that kind of look at the simplicity, because you can get sucked into, oh, that right front, or oh, that left hind, or whatever, you're like focused in on. But what's the bigger picture doing? And I think that's really important for people to learn. This is what I mean by body awareness. Right. What are the connected events through the body, rather than this is, what I can't get, or this is where I think the issue is.
Right. Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, I think that now that I'm sort of in a different space with my perception of when even this morning we had a horse, and he's been kicking out and kind of crow hopping. And for me, I asked her, what are you asking your horse to do? Well, I'm asking him to trot, and when I feel him get tight, I get tight, and then they bounce back and forth. And then I had to look at, well, what am I asking the horse to do, and why does it feel different, and why is the response different? And for me, it was when we're having those behaviors, it feels like if you shift that to they're communicating to you. And I'm like, for me, he's saying that's hard for me to do. It's not ride him through it, push him forward, make him use his, because you are so conditioned, just like kids in school. It's like when you grow up riding or you have trainers that are so traditional, those are the things you hear all the time. And to have so many more people now that I talk to, shifting that to their community, he's saying that's hard for him. So what can you do to help him have more range of motion in that hindquarter, or, you know, be more comfortable actually using it versus I'm going to smack him and kick him forward. And, you know, so he just shuts down that whole part of his body because it's uncomfortable. So he'll keep doing it until they then don't know they have a hind end and their hindquarters are switching leads back and forth and their canter is horrible. You know, it's like, I just love the fact that there are more people having that conversation, intertwining that thought process versus kick them forward and move them through it, like push them, you know, it's good. I like it. It makes me feel better. And so having people that are doing body work and having dressage trainers or trainers of different, you know, modalities working together, I feel like I'm hearing about that a lot now. And we actually did a clinic out here with Sandy Reberg and Susan Fay, and it was almost like Susan doing energy work and Sandy doing body work, and then kind of connecting it into the rider and, you know, what their bodies are doing once they're riding. It's it kind of feels good that there's more of that happening now, and that's kind of shifting the horse world.
I think it's important to have a team, and I tell people all the time, you know, it's important to have somebody that is willing to work in a team. I don't work alone.
Yeah.
I have awesome trainers that work with me that allow the horses to really utilize their body and tell the riders to sit correctly. All these riders have saddle fit people. You know, they have farriers. I work with, like I said, a opponent of mine. I work with people with other modalities because everybody gravitates towards something different. So I love working with, I have a very good acupuncture vet, Derek Laviola, who's awesome. And we do lots of conversations where, you know, he sees it in this way and I see it in that way. And we're driving down the road on these parallel tracks going and kind of sharing information. And a lot of times, you know, sometimes I feel like there's something happening in the horse that maybe is out of my wheelhouse, or, you know, the horse is like, I don't want what you're offering, which is fair enough. And I think you need to be open to get that as well as a practitioner and as an owner, that sometimes the horse needs something new or something different that will help whatever they're struggling with. So a lot of times I'll say to them, you know, I think it's time for you to get some acupuncture, certainly for big visceral things, or just if I feel like the gut's doing weird things and we've not been able to help it, or just if I feel like the horses, I show up, I do my thing, and I'm like, nah. And so I'll say, you know, maybe you want to reach out to this person, or maybe you want to reach out to somebody else. I don't take it personally when they try somebody else, because everybody gravitates to something else. And I wish there was more of that openness of, like we were saying at the beginning, where you just kind of collect things. It doesn't mean, you know, that if somebody goes out and gets acupuncture, they're never going to use me again. It's just something different that might help the horse, which means that the next time I come, we can make bigger changes, or we can achieve something that has been a little out of reach. And so I think it's really important that people understand you need a village. You need to try and find people that are willing to work with other people. So if you have a vet that doesn't believe in what your body worker is doing, it's a struggle for the owner. If you have a farrier who won't talk to anybody, it's a struggle for the owner. If you have a body worker that thinks that they know it all and doesn't need to involve anybody else, that's a struggle for the owner and for the horse. It's, you know, it's not realistic. We all need our work checked. We all need additional input. We all need help. And so I think it's really important that there are collaborations, and that people feel like they can turn to the people in their lives and say, I'm struggling with this. What do you think? Because this is what they think, and this is what she thinks, and this is what he thinks. Right. And for nobody to get upset and go, well, they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah. Because there's just like a million different ways to get something accomplished. So having a closed
right.
that, then you're really shutting yourself off from options. So I usually ask this question, but I feel like you already answered it, probably because I set the intention for it to get answered. But and I heard it and I was like, there it is, but it may be different now. What do you feel like is one of the most important questions someone can sort of ask of themselves before they like enter into their horse's space? And I know you had kind of said, where am I at today, you know, physically, but if there's something.
So I will tell you the story of what happened and maybe that'll answer it. Because I think the biggest thing we can do with horses is what do we bring with us? Mm-hmm. Okay, so when we show up, so my husband and I have the silliest game. We send each other, like we leave the car on with like some really podunk old 80s song, right, that you haven't heard in years. And so we just, so you turn the car on and you're like, oh. So I had Wham on. And I'm driving to the barn and I wake me up before you go all the way. And I get out the car and I'm all like, and the horses are like, no.
No, thank you.
And so the thing is, what are you bringing? And there are days, and I know it's hard because there are days I show up, I have to work and I'm like, my mind's somewhere else. And the horse is like, oh, can you just not? Just don't. Is really, what are you bringing in terms of who you are and what you are? Because horses are a mirror. And so, you know, they really try and kind of align with what you bring. And so I think that awareness of, you know, come and be honest. If you're having a bad day, it's okay. Your pony's going to get it. Just come in and go, I hate everyone.
Yeah.
I just want to sit here. My mare used to do that. Like I'd come in and I'd just sit there and she'd be like, oh my God, why are you feeling sorry for yourself? And she'd just come and hang over me and she'd be like, are you done yet? But be honest with where you are. So if you're having a bad day, don't show up and think today I'm going to get my cross canter, because you're not. You're just not. Okay. You know, if you're having like, if you come in and you're like, oh, I'm so tired, or I'm like super excited and like, I am just going to a party tonight. I got my dress. I'm excited. Now I'm going to go on and ride and do a little, you know, lead changes. And the horse is like, holy cow, what are you on? It doesn't, like, be honest. Be honest with what you're asking the horse to do and right. where you are at.
Right.
Be it physically or emotionally, right? And I think that's kind of the most important thing for us to remember is, if you think somebody shared, who shared it? Oh, I remember. My friend Heather Reynolds shared it. Mm-hmm. I remember this is a couple of years ago about how horses' lives are, that most of them live in solitary confinement. Mm-hmm. Most of them change homes
right.
many times throughout their lives. Mm-hmm. Most of them, you know, don't get any say, don't get any choice, and yet we expect them to behave perfectly all the time.
Right.
So be honest with yourself when you show up at the barn and you want to do something with your horse. Like, be honest with yourself so that your horse can be honest with you, and have a hot minute of like, okay, where are all the things today? Right? What is realistic? Mm-hmm. And I think when you have that intention of we're just going to be honest with each other, a lot more can be achieved.
Right.
When we acknowledge that they're struggling or that we're struggling, mm-hmm. A lot more can be achieved. Mm-hmm. If we come in and we think, oh, you're just being a pill, well, guess what? They're going to be a pill, because that's what you've labeled them. And right. horses are really good at owning what you label them with.
Definitely. I always tell people, you don't have to come and pretend. You know, you always hear people, oh, well, the horses and dogs, they can sense fear. And I do some other sessions with non-horse people. And I always tell them, you don't have to act like you're not afraid. You just have to say you're afraid. And once you just acknowledge, this is where I'm at today, you can feel the tension actually leave and the alignment kind of come in when you're just real and you're not having to pretend. I was like, they know when you're faking it, so you might as well just be real, because they don't want anything to do with anyone that feels out of alignment. You know what I mean? Even emotionally or whatever it is that causes them to.
Don't wake me up before you go.
Yeah.
It was hilarious. They all stuck their head out, and I'm like, and they like all turned tail and went away. They're like, nope, don't need that.
So funny. Oh, so good. So if people want to work with you and they want to find more out about what you're doing, if you're doing clinics, what you're doing, where can they go to find you?
Well, I put everything on my Facebook page. I don't really, and I have a website, Elkayam Equine Therapy.com.
Okay.
And I have, it's all on my Facebook page. That's really where I post everything. My clinics are on my website.
Okay.
And I have a Vimeo platform if people like anatomy, where I put all my anatomy drawings and all the kind of how it's put together. But yeah, I put everything on Facebook. I don't have lots of places. Like I said, I'm lazy. It's all there.
You should
you just have to
that as efficient.
I don't have multiple sites and multiple things going on. I'm just not that motivated. So they can find stuff out there. I think they're all full now. All the clinics this year are full. I'm going to work on some more. The problem is, for me is it's a long day and I'm not that keen on traveling so far to do them, but I guess I'm going to have to bite the bullet and do that a little bit more.
You're needed.
Well, yes, I am, but I'm hoping other people will also do this. I mean, I think for me, it's always the case of, I sometimes go, am I the only one who's figured this out? I'm not that smart. I can't be the only one who's figured it out. I'm sure there's other people who have figured it out. Maybe they're just too quiet. They need to be a little louder.
I feel like it is a shift, and I feel like there are more trainers. The only reason I know is because when I started, I shifted from just doing problem horses I had to just stop taking horses in training because I didn't know how to transition to something different without people going, wait a minute, I know I've been watching you do this, and that's not how. I needed to just put a stop to it. And it was hard because once you start to realize there's so much more, even from the emotional side, the mental side, the person side, the physical side, it's also overwhelming. But once I committed to going, I'm going to create a safe place for me to call the owner out with love, call the different things out, and create that whole entire big picture of where is this starting from? Why is this happening? Not here's some martingale to stick on your horse to make its head go where you think it should go. Why doesn't it want to go into a space where it's balanced? Why can't it? But so when I shifted and then I started doing the podcast, even this season, I started finding a lot of different trainers that were, co-creating with body workers and meshing in all of the work together. So I do think now that my vision is open more to it, it's starting to pop into my space and I'm finding them. So I think that's the beauty of it. And something that I had talked about doing, and I think it actually might happen this coming year, was finding the people that are working in a way where they can work cohesively with other modalities and with other trainers and meshing it all together and having that conversation where it's like having everyone there, it's like we called it the Unexpo because I participated in the expo up in SAC. And I was like, wouldn't it be cool if the whole place, every trainer, every body worker, everyone there was all in alignment with what we were doing, and we didn't have to pick and choose. Everybody.
Yes, it would be cool if everybody was into it. I think there are a couple of issues with that, just in terms of, I'm like one of the people that wish that there was a governing body for body workers, that there were exams and licenses that were required, so that when somebody called a body worker out, they would know that all of them are of a certain level with a certain amount of education. Because I feel like it's all too easy, me including when I started, to do a little course and hang out your shingle.
Yeah,
And so, and I feel the same way about trainers. I think it would be nice if there was some way, and I think maybe that's why there's a lot of people, because I know I experience it sometimes where you're like, okay, these people, they know enough to be dangerous, but
right.
they're not really doing anything. And so you get to the point where if you've done it for long enough, you come up against that and you're like, so I get why sometimes there is that I'd like to work with people, but I don't.
Yeah.
Or why not everybody can be in on the party.
Right.
But I think, eventually we'll get there. I'd really like to hope that eventually there would be some sort of governing body that would allow for there to be a very clear marker of, yes, you have enough education, yes, you know what you're doing. And then it would take out of the equation that whole he said, she said competition, because everybody would be talking about the same thing, know the same thing, and then be open to sharing, maybe. I don't know. But yes, it would be nice if we could all just come together and like help horses. Because the thing is, it's not that we shouldn't ride horses, because if we didn't ride them, there'd be no need for them. But they're not designed to be ridden. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to be honest, like we are about a whole bunch of other things that we talked about the fact that they weren't designed to be ridden.
Right.
And the fact that they can be is great, but that requires a lot of skill and requires for things to be right in order for us to not break the animal. Right. The last post I did about fascia as a hydraulic amplifier was exactly that the moment you put a saddle on a horse's back, you are essentially shutting down that hydraulic amplification within the thoracolumbar fascia. And does that mean we shouldn't ride them? No, but if we know that and we address it before and after so that the horse can maintain that mobility of the tissue, then we're going to be able to keep riding it as opposed to keep breaking it down.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Those are all the conversations. I think there's so many things that people don't really, it's just such an unconscious thing because you grow up, put the saddle on, put the bridle on, even just me diving into that more anatomy side of it and realizing where the nerves are and how the bridle and the nose band, like all the things. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like nobody even thinks about this. Like it's because it's just not common knowledge, right? It's not.
Well, and this is part of why I share what I share, because I'm looking to make things like that common knowledge, because for too long it has been this like closeted secret where, why are we doing this? Because that's the way it's always been done. Well, that's not an answer. Mm-hmm. And so I think it is important that's why I share a lot of what I share, because if I feel like I've said it often enough to clients, I'm like, maybe people don't know about this and it should be shared, so that, everybody can go, oh, wow, I need to think about that. And, something simple like giving the horse a good grooming after and letting it walk a little after a roll, which, is really basic, can really help restore that mobility. So, hey, now you have awareness, you can do something for it. Just think of the benefit of that. And it's just a small droplet of information that, can make a difference to many horses.
Yeah, so good. Well, thank you so much. I had so much fun chatting with you. And I definitely want to, I know you're in Gilroy next year. And well, I guess you're local. I didn't know you were in Texas. So that actually gives me more hope that I'll actually be able to connect with you in person. And,
yeah, it would be cool.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, thank you so much. And so I'll put all
Thank you for having me. It was a fun chat.
Yeah, I'll link your website and everything in the show notes, and then
cool.
Find you when they want to.
Awesome. Right. Thank you so much.